Last time, we continued with Division E, entitled Motion on the Physical and Astral Planes. It's with an emphasis on the three kinds of motion, where we looked into the quote-unquote mystery of the second chain by exploring the lines of connection between the second and fourth chains of the Earth scheme. One of the great events connected with this mystery of the second chain was the quote unification of the two modes of manifestation, rotary and spiral cyclic, which happened in the middle part of what we call the third chain, an event that set the conditions for the development of the monastic principle. We then took a look at the law of attraction, wielded by the second logos, which works to merge spirit and form, and the law of repulsion, one of the laws under the law of economy, whose purpose is to maintain the separation of all atoms of substance, to keep them from forming congeries of atoms, and thus repulses all tendency to group formation. We then learned that the spirit, through the influence of the second logos, seeks ever to separate itself from matter by attracting an ever more adequate type of matter in the process of distinguishing the real from the unreal. So it draws to itself higher vibratory levels of matter in its effort to create a form that is more appropriate for the indwelling spirit. These forms of a progressively heightened sensitivity eventually create a condition wherein soul response and soul infusion becomes possible. On a higher turn of the spiral, quote-unquote adequate matter manifests in ever subtler forms, eventually allowing for monadic response and the triumph of spirit over matter. This spirit form affinity is beautifully illustrated in the temple statues all throughout energy, where you have the Shakti aspect shown here in the feminine form, aligned with and ever oriented towards, attracted to the deity aspect or the spirit aspect, which is represented by the tri-form or the three-faced deity. We then began the section on the first logos, whose mode of action is, quote, a literal driving forward of the solar ring pass knot through space. It is not possible, we're told, to conceive of the first aspect of will or power as it really is, but can only know it through its influence on the second and third aspects. We then studied the first logos's orientation to the cosmic center of this system, and that it, quote, brings in the influence of other constellations. And finally, we learned that the first logos embodies the will to live, and that it was through its agency that the Manasaputras came into objective existence. And this takes us to where we left off last time. So, could we get a reader, please, to start us off for today's work?
Yep. And Veronica.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Could you read for us?
Yes, yes. In this system, the blending of the divine ray of wisdom and the primordial ray of intelligent matter forms the great dual evolution. Back of both those cosmic entities stands another entity who is the embodiment of will and who is the utilizer of forms. though not the forms of any other than the greater building devas and the human hierarchies in time and space. He is the animating principle, the will to live aspect of the seven hierarchies. Nevertheless, these seven hierarchies are, as says H.P. Blavatsky, the sevenfold ray of wisdom, the dragon in its seven forms. May I ask something, because it's
Sure,
in
of
my
course.
reading today. What's the difference between the primordial ray and the divine ray?
Yeah, the primordial ray is the third ray of substance. I get into that. And the key here is the, I'm sorry, I just have it back. The divine ray of wisdom. Yeah, the primordial ray of an intelligent matter is the third ray, right? And the divine ray of wisdom is the second ray of love wisdom. Primordial because it was the first to be manifest. It was through that ray that manifestation was possible. Okay? Okay, so first up, in this system, the blending of the divine ray of wisdom and the primordial ray of intelligent matter forms the great dual evolution. The dual evolution is human and Davic. The blending of the second and third rays was initiated in the middle of the third chain by the, quote, a unification of the two modes of manifestation, rotary and spiral cyclic. Every kingdom in nature participates in the blended influence of these two rays. The second aspect, law of attraction, working with the matter of the third aspect through rotary, spiral, and cyclic motion. There is no separated third ray except for in our effort to understand its influence. But in truth, all manifestation is ruled by the combination of these two rays, driving matter towards spirit. Okay? Next, back of both these cosmic entities stands another entity who is the embodiment of will and who is the utilizer of forms, though not the forms of any other than the greater building devas and the human hierarchies in time and space. So this last phrase points to the third life wave. For only the human and Deva kingdoms are, the former through initiation, able to transfer their consciousness onto the Buddhic plane, where the influence of the first aspect can be experienced. See, you see here that this area highlighted in white is a first logoic influence called the third life wave outpouring of spirit. So a human being has to cross the antikarana in order to have this experience, to even know of this third life wave. And we're told there's also a parallel Davic experience. DK tells us that, quote, the devas do not work as individualized conscious units through self-initiating purposes, meaning, going through initiation, as does a man, a heavenly man or solar logos, viewed as egos. But they work in groups subject to inherent impulse or latent active intelligence, orders issued by the greater builders, and ritual or compulsion induced through color and sound. So nonetheless, the Davic method of evolution described here eventually advances them into states of consciousness equivalent to those of high initiates. Next up, and I want to remind you that I very much invite conversation and interaction. So anytime you have a question, no matter how simple it may seem, come forth. And anytime you have a comment and you just like to discuss a concept, that's what makes these sessions more interesting. So come forward when you do. Okay, next up, he is the animating principle, talking about the first logos here, is the animating principle, the will to live aspect of the 7 hierarchies. So here are the 7 hierarchies for which the first aspect or first logos provides the will to live. Perhaps we get closest to a description of the energy of the first logos in the description of the energy of the first hierarchy. Quote, Parashakti, supreme energy, the first aspect of the 6th type of cosmic electricity. One of the names of this hierarchy, the burning suns of desire, suggests that the 6th subray of the first ray substands the 6th type of cosmic electricity. We know that the rays are electrical in nature. For example, in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, DK says, the 6th ray differentiates that aspect of the universal electrical energy which is produced to serve man's material needs. So, if you take this description and you go back to this description of the Parashakti or supreme energy, you see a relationship. We know it's first ray because of that appears in this column. And note too that in the following columns, for instance, the second aspect aligns with the second ray, right? We could assume that the third aspect is the Jnana Shakti, force of mind, that wields the third aspect, right? Third ray. So we can make a connection between what he's calling first aspect and the first ray. And then of the 6th type suggests a subray. And as we just learned, this provides, is an aspect of universal electrical energy, which is produced to serve makes possible the manifestation in the material realms, which is the whole purpose of these hierarchies, right? Which is to facilitate experience in the 3 worlds of the material realms. Okay. Okay, next up. Nevertheless, these 7 hierarchies are, as says HPB, the 7-fold ray of wisdom, the dragon in its 7 forms. Well, the 7-fold ray of wisdom is the second ray. So in spite of the fact that the 7 hierarchies are animated by the first aspect, they are nonetheless expressions, and there's where the difference lies, right, of the second ray of love wisdom. You could say in our solar system, all those listed rays for the hierarchies are subrays of the second ray. Okay, any questions about this? A little tricky, but we've covered some of this material before. Okay, let's take a look at the footnotes referenced by the term, the dragon in its 7 forms, which, as we've just been told, is a second ray entity. The following is one of the more relevant quotes from the pages referenced by footnotes 66 and 68. We'll start with the verse from stanza 3 on the left. to which the passage on the right, as well as the passages that follow, refers. Okay, so could we get a reader for this, please?
Yeah, I think,
Why don't we have a reader for the left-hand column and then a second reader for the right-hand column?
all right. So I think Ann Parker, you are reading now, right? You still down.
Yes, sure, I can.
Cool.
Okay, I should do the first.
Yeah, just do this one column on the left. That's the actual stanza. So put on your, your old school presentation form here.
All right. Stanza 3, verse 7. Behold, O Lanu, the radiant child of the two, the unparalleled, refulgent glory, bright space, son of dark space, who emerges from the depths of the great dark waters. It is,
Oh, yeah.
oh, thank you. The younger, the whom thou knowest now as Quan Shai Yin, apologies for my pronunciation, comment. He shines forth as the sun. He is the blazing divine dragon of wisdom. The Eka is Chatur, 4, and Chatur takes to itself 3, and the union produces the Sapta, 7, in whom are the 7 which become the Tridasa, the thrice 10, the hosts and the multitudes. Behold him lifting the veil and unfurling it from east to west. He shuts out the above and leaves the below to be seen as the great illusion. He marks the places for the shining ones, stars, and turns the upper space into a shoreless sea of fire, and the one manifested element into the great waters.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So this is the solar logos, right? The radiant child of the two, we're looking at the father aspect and the mother aspect, pure spirit and form, which is described here as bright space, son of dark space. Dark because it's the source of light, and that would be the first logos, right? And that, and this, then occurs what happens, emerging from the depths of the great dark waters, which are not just space, but primordial existence. That is, before we have the cosmic physical plane, right? And then the name, Oiaohu, the younger. And then in the Chinese, it's Quan Shai Yin, which is not Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin is the daughter, you could say. It's the aspect called the word that goes forth. That's what Kuan Yin is. Quan Shai Yin is this great being that we're reading about. Eka is one, kind of like Ein Sof of the tree of life. So the 1 becomes 4, and the 4 takes to itself 3 to become 7. So you have the 1, 3, 7. And then it moves into the multitudes, the 33. Behold him, I love this. Behold him lifting the veil and unfurling it from east to west. Interestingly, and we're going to learn this today, that the cosmic physical planes rotate as a sphere from east to west, right? And this is the unfurling that this solar logos is doing here, is the unfurling from the highest to the lowest of these 7 planes of existence, from the Adi plane down to the physical plane, which would be in the far west, right? East being the Adi plane, and he unfurls it from east to west. He shuts out the above, which would mean that above the cosmic physical plane, the cosmic astral and above, leaves the below to be seen as the great illusion. He marks the place of the shining ones, the stars. Let's see. Yeah, and so again, you see this duality, this division between the shoreless sea of fire. That can also apply to the Uddy plane, sometimes called the sea of fire, and that which lies below, which is the one manifested. Okay, so that's just a thumbnail description of this. So these are, on the right here, we have HPB's take or description on this stanza, which we covered in the Secret Doctrine probably a couple of years ago now. It's been a while. So could we get a reader for this column, please?
Yeah, Fred, are you there? I know it's yeah.
He usually
Mic's
takes a
open.
while to unmute. So
His mic's open, but I don't
yeah, he takes a while
hear
sometimes
him.
to get to it.
I don't have my glasses on. It would be way better if I read later on.
Okay. Okay, Fred.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Heike.
Bright space, son of dark space, corresponds to the ray dropped at the first thrill of the new dawn into the great cosmic depths, from which it re-emerges, differentiated as Oya Ohu, the younger, the new life, to become the end of the life cycle, the germ of all things. He is the incorporeal man, who contains in himself the divine idea, the generator of light and life, to use an expression of Philo-Judaeus. He is called the blazing dragon of wisdom, because firstly, he is that which the Greek philosophers called the logos, the verbum of the thought divine, and secondly, because in esoteric philosophy, this first manifestation, being the synthesis or aggregate of universal wisdom, Oya Ohu, the son of the sun, contains in himself the seven creative hosts, the Sephirot, and is thus the essence of manifested wisdom. He who bathes in the light of Oya Ohu will never be deceived by the veil of Maya.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple more quotes from this same section. So any comments or questions about this? Wouldn't it be great if we still had a religion that was recognized the solo logos as a supreme deity, as indicated by this Gnostic amulet? Okay, reader for this next section, please. This also are quotes connected to that same verse that we just read. It was read by Anne. Reader, please.
Hey, Janet, would you like to read it?
Sure. The primitive symbol of the serpent symbolized divine wisdom and perfection, and had always stood for psychical regeneration and immortality. Hence Hermes, calling the serpent the most spiritual of all beings. Moses, initiated in the wisdoms of Hermes, following suit in Genesis, the Gnostic serpent with the seven vowels over its head, being the emblem of the seven hierarchies of the septarian or planetary creators. Materialists and the men of modern science will never understand it, since in order to obtain clear perception of it, one has first of all to admit the postulate of a universality, diffused, omnipresent, eternal deity in nature. Secondly, to have fathomed the mystery of electricity in its true essence. And thirdly, to credit man with a being, the septarian symbol of the terrestrial plane, of the one great
Unit.
you. Oh, I couldn't even
Yeah,
see.
I should have
Uh,
brought these larger, but I forgot to.
That's okay. The logos, which is itself the seven-voweled sign, the breath crystallized into the word.
So again, the word is the feminine aspect, the Kuan Yin, and the logos itself, the source of the word, is the Kuan Shai Yin, which is this sevenfold dragon. And so you can see that the vowels associated with it, the seven vowels, you can literally assign to the seven subplanes of the cosmic physical plane as great words of creation that would be carried from Kuan Shai Yin through Kuan Yin into manifestations. Really quite extraordinary. The second stanza in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, it's a few pages long, describes this whole process of how how the word manifests and creates the different planes. I see a hand. I see a couple of hands.
To Jerry.
This is fascinating because recently I've been looking at images of the Virgin, the Mother Mary, and Kuan Yin, and I find that they have often in the West, it's usually the Mother Mary stepping on a snake, and in Kuan Yin, she's stepping on a dragon or riding a dragon, and it's
two different meanings there.
Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, there's two serpents, and this is true in many different ancient cultures. For instance, in Egypt, you have the lower serpent, which is the serpent of materiality. It's called Apophis, and they blame everything on this serpent. It's kind of, I think it's where the serpent that showed up in the Garden of Eden came from, but way before that, there was always the primordial dragon, and that would be the dragon that she's riding. And that shows, it's very much like that image I showed of the Shakti and the deity. That's very much like that, except for in this case, the rider, Kuan Yin, would be the Shakti riding or at oneing with the divine dragon of wisdom, right? And also carrying the word, because that's the feminine is always the carrier of the word. In Hinduism, she's called the Vash. In Chinese, she's Kuan Yin, right? And she carries the word, which are magical formula, not just information, it's not just scripture. It's literally the word of creation that allows for creation to happen, right? So those are the two forms of the dragon.
Would you say the first form of the dragon again?
Or just the lower form. The first form, I mean, if you're going to assign first and second, the first, I described the lower dragon first, but the first dragon is the dragon of wisdom, which is depicted here, right? That's the great Oya-Ohu, the solar logos, really, right? And it's a second ray being in our solar system, right? And then the lower dragon is the serpent of materiality And like I said, that's the one that shows up in the Garden of Eden to tempt Eve in with the apple, which is the apple of knowledge. So, this is all part of the plan. Eve was supposed to eat that apple, and she's supposed to take Adam out of the garden with her into incarnation in order to gain experience. The Christians have turned it into this great source of evil and lament and, oh, miserable sinner I am. But it's all part of the purpose, right? So that serpent was the serpent of wisdom, or of the a in the sense of intelligent activity, right?
Okay.
So in
Thank
a
you.
sense they're not even separate. One is a manifestation of the other. The whole evil thing assigned with the serpent came much later, when the church, or whatever church there was, because even the Egyptians did it, needed someone to blame, a source for evil, right?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I
That's
see
helpful.
someone else. Yeah, you're welcome. Another hand?
Yeah, Yvonne.
Francis, you had said that wouldn't it be great to have a religion where they recognize the solar logos as God? We don't have that. What is the closest thing to that we do have? It was the Egyptians.
Well, we're doing it right now. I'm talking about now. I mean, I was just lamenting that, you have amulets showing the cross with Jesus on it. But here, what you've got is literally a depiction of the solar logos and the vowels used for the creation of our solar system. I mean, what a difference! What a high version of religion. And there's alternative religions that recognize this level of reality, but the great religions of the world, the ones that are practiced for the most part, represent a more material form of these higher realities. That's my opinion anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we're doing footnotes here, and finally we have this footnote which actually appears in the text. So could we get a reader for this?
Kirsten, you want to read?
Saburo says in 5 Years of Theosophy, page 102, as a general rule, whenever 7 entities are mentioned in the ancient occult science of India in any connection whatsoever, you must suppose that those 7 entities came into existence from 3 primary entities, and that these 3 entities again are evolved out of a single entity of monads. To take a familiar example, the 7 colored rays in the solar ray are evolved out of 3 primary colored rays, and the 3 primary colors coexist with the 4 secondary colors in the solar ray. Similarly, the 3 primary entities which brought man into existence coexist in him with 4 secondary entities which arose from different combinations of the 3 primary entities.
Okay, since we're going to be getting into this subject matter more specifically, for the most part, we won't analyze this paragraph. But it's this last point on the secondary entities being combinations of the primary entities is specific and interesting. MDR, Michael, hypothesizes that ray 4 is a combination of the energies of ray 1 and 2, that ray 5 is a combination of rays 1 and 3, Ray 6, a combination of rays 2 and 3, and ray 7, a combination of the energies of all three rays 1, 2, and 3. I've always found this as a very helpful insight into the nature of the four rays of attribute, rays 4, 5, 6, and 7, because you get a sense of their intrinsic components. So when you're trying to figure out ray 4, the fact that it's a combination of 1 and 2 really does give you a further insight into its nature. And that's true of all of these combinations. So, I recommend that you keep this in mind. Okay, any thoughts or questions about this? All right. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
I can read.
Okay, Fred, thank you.
This is a deep mystery, and only a clue to it all can be found at this time by man in the contemplation of his own nature in the three worlds of his manifestation. Just as our logos is seeking objectivity through his solar system in its threefold form, of which the present is the second, so man seeks objectivity through his three bodies, physical, astral, and mental. At this time, he is polarized in his astral body, or in his second aspect, in like manner as the undifferentiated logos is polarized in his second aspect. In time and space, as we now conceive it, the sum total of jivas are governed by feeling, emotion, and desire, and not by the will. Yet, at the same time, the will aspect governs manifestation. For the ego, who is the source of personality, shows in manifestation the will to love. Boy, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, that's why we break this stuff down. Okay, because it's easy to just kind of gloss over, isn't it? And, okay, first up, this is a deep mystery, and only a clue to it all can be found at this time by man in the contemplation of his own nature in the three worlds of manifestation. Okay, the deep mystery references the statement, nevertheless, these seven hierarchies are, as says HPB, the sevenfold ray of wisdom, the dragon and its seven forms. Between reading this and where we are now, we have that whole reading on the footnotes. So this is what it's referencing, that this deep mystery is this sevenfold dragon, right? So just as the logos manifests through seven hierarchies, that's as shown here on the left, our monad manifests through seven principles, and both are expressive of and governed by the seven rays. Next, just as our logos is seeking objectivity through his solar system in its threefold form, of which the present is the second, so man seeks objectivity through his three bodies, physical, astral, and mental. So, you all know that there was a previous solar system which was oriented towards the ruled by the third ray and oriented towards the development of the physical aspect, right? And that this solar system is about development of consciousness and about the soul. And the next will be the development of the will aspect and the monad will be the principal um, uh, um, influence, just as the soul in this solar system is the principal influence. So this is an interesting comparison between, the solar logos and a human being, since a human being functions simultaneously in its three lower vehicles, whereas the threefold form of the solar logos unfolds sequentially. But I was thinking about it, and it seems to me that in terms of mastery, a disciple also progresses sequentially through his or her three lower vehicles by means of the first of three initiations, right? Mastering the first, the physical plane at the first, the astral plane at the second, and the mental plane at the third initiation, roughly, very roughly speaking, right? And the solar logos develops its nature in the same way over three solar systems. Okay. Next, at the same time, he is polarized in his astral body, or in his second aspect, in like manner as the undifferentiated logos is polarized in his second aspect. Okay, he's talking about man and the logos here. So it goes without saying that the second aspect of the solar logos is not the astral plane of the average man. We're not talking about the sixth subplane of the cosmic physical plane in terms of the solar logos's polarization in his astral body, which of course will be the cosmic astral, not the physical astral, right? Let's take a look at MDR's comments on this statement. So this is the statement that these are referencing, and the reader can just start reading here.
Hey, Magda, do you want to read? And you had a good question there too, so if you want to ask it.
Yes, do you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
We know that man, in terms of the great majority of the members of human family, is polarized in his astral nature. But it is useful to know that our solar logos is also polarized in his astral body. This information should be compared with information on the polarization of the 7 solar systems, and with the relative development of our solar logos to the logos of Sirius, who, it seems, is no longer the victim of astral polarization. It is a very peculiar thought that the undifferentiated logos should be polarized in his second aspect. Usually, the undifferentiated logos is considered a vast being anteceding cosmos, a universal God, or the God of the entire universe. Perhaps this statement is telling us something about a predominating divine aspect in relation to the universe as a whole. In this context, the term undifferentiated logos seems to relate to the deepest nature of the solar logos. We really need to know what is meant in this context by the undifferentiated logos, the logos which is usually conceived expressing a blend of undifferentiated spirit matter. At that level, is this undifferentiated logos to be placed? May we, in this context, consider the undifferentiated logos to be the monadic aspect of our solar logos?
So, thoughts or questions? Okay. Next up, in time and space, as we now conceive it, the sum total of jivas are governed by feeling, emotion, and desire, and not by the will. Yet, at the same time, the will aspect governs manifestation. For the ego, who is the source of personality, shows in manifestation the will to love. So, does the quote, sum total of jivas here cited refer to the whole solar system or just to our planet? DK seems to be talking systemically. In Raised Initiations, DK describes the three aspects of will as, quote, the will to power, the will to love, and the will to know. They're almost like sub-rays of the will aspect, right? Or conversely, the first sub-ray of each of the three main rays. You can look at it either way, they are related. And in esoteric astrology, he gives more insight on the will to love. Could we get a reader, please?
Marianne.
Oh, wait a minute.
Christine.
Before Christine, you read. Magda, did you have a question? I guess you might have put it in the chat. Is that right? Let's see. Yeah, I'm seeing
I
it.
could, if she wants to read it, she can read it. If not, I can.
Yeah, or I can.
Or you can read.
Yes, the question was the way you just discussed 10 minutes ago, the same way we can define the logos or the over-keter, over the Ein Sof, and so on. As we can say, they're realistically or technically or wisely, as how we want to say, in a not religious way, okay, not anthropomorphized God way. The same way we can talk about logos and Ein Sof like this. How can we define or talk about divas or angelic hierarchies in the same wise, technical way?
Right. Devas are manipulators of the third aspect energy in order to do the bidding of the second and third logos. Well, ultimately, even the first logos. But they literally weave form. And at the lowest aspect, the elementals are the bodies of the elementals are literally the forms that are created by the higher devas, right? But I see them more as great nexuses or nexi, like chakras are nexus. The devas are nexuses of intelligent, directed energy. They are indeed entified, but it's ridiculous to think of them in terms of, having a human form with wings, for instance. That's just our way of trying to understand what they are. I think Jeffrey Hodgson is probably the closest in terms of being able to illustrate the sense of how they are. I'm sure that you're familiar, if not just Google Jeffrey with a GEOFF, Jeffrey Hodgson, and you'll get a real treat because he did a whole book of illustrating a series of Davic beings, which the Christians call angelic. Manipulators of energy for the purpose of creation would be one way of putting them. And they are their own line of evolution from the lowest elemental type all the way up to great Devalords that oversee the planes of our cosmic physical plane.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, you're
Jeffrey
welcome.
Hudson.
Oh, wait a minute.
Jeffrey Hudson.
Hang on just a sec. Yeah, Jeffrey Hodgson, GEOFFREY, Hodgson, HODSON.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Robert.
Can we just go back to the page on TCF we were just looking at for a moment? Yeah, I'm really struck by this, what's in bold now, in time and space as we now conceive it.
Yeah.
Okay, so time and space are not objective realities. They are just
Right.
what we conceive. And so it's clear that the solar logos conceives time and space in very different ways. And it's hard to wrap one's head about it, but in some fashion, the three solar systems, there's no past first solar system. You know, it's all happening in a kind of simultaneity of time for the solar logos, just as our physical bodies are not the past of our egoic experience through the three worlds, which is what he's saying above. It's a brain twister.
It's a brain thing. Yeah.
But it's very interesting, I think.
Yeah, when we're in, when we're in incarnation, we move into sequential time and space, which is, really the only way that we are able to arrange in our minds events. But certainly there is a vast difference of the experience of time and space. So I think the solar logos experiences time and space, as long as there's any form aspect at all, any sheaths involved. And you have cycles, and cycles from our point of view are unfold in time. We can, one theory is the one you mentioned, the idea that they're all coexistent at the same time. And that's very much like, for instance, the seven globes being coexistent in a chain, and that through the rounds, which is a function of time, they are sequentially inhabited, right? So you have both happening kind of at the same time. The globes, all the globes exist right now. The other six more ethereal globes of our Earth globe exist, but we are now in the fourth globe experience, and which is also happens to be the most physical of all that. So
I was just playing off of this earlier paragraph where he makes the correspondence between the logos having objectivity through his threefold solar systems and us having our, and man having objectivity through his three bodies. In other words,
yeah,
it may in fact be true in some fashion that it's impossible to understand that the physical body is in a different time scale than the emotional body and in the mental body. But we experience our physical and these other perceptions. There's a kind of oneness of time that we're, forget space, but in terms of how we experience it. So it's interesting to think about the solar logos in that sense.
In that
having
sense.
this correspondence,
Yeah, it is, in that correspondence, you have the three logoi representing matter, spirit, and that which unites them, the second aspect, as coexisting. There's a chart that shows, and actually it comes up later in this series, that shows those three logoic aspects of the solar logos. And certainly they're going to be related to the previous, the current, and the next solar system. And, how deep does that relation go in terms of, are they identical? For instance, is the first logos actually the energy of the next solar system manifesting, not manifesting, I should say, in its current non or unmanifest stage in this solar system, right? And the same thing with the third logos, which is the representative of the last solar system, and thus the matter aspect of this solar system. And of course, that's carried right down to the three offices, the Manu, the the Bodhisattva and the Lord of Civilization, who are also representatives of those three aspects. So they have to each be tied to the three sequential, quote unquote, solar systems.
Yeah, and those are all good points. And I think what I'm reaching for, and again, it's way speculation. If we had the ability or the level, we could go now to the first solar system. It's not over. It is now occurring. It's
Yeah,
only
I don't know that I
time.
agree with that, Robert, because they are developmental. They, in other words, this system, and there's lots of commentary in DK's work that talks about how this system is the fruit of the last system, and yet is dependent on, from a material aspect, on that which was established in the last system, but that it is developing areas of consciousness that weren't present in the last system, and that the matter of this system will eventually include the love aspect, which will be the matter for the first solar system, which will be the next one. I meant, the first aspect solar system, the next one. And there's developmentally, they're very sequential, so.
Yeah, but fruit, like, when you look at the word fruit, which you just used, fruit is a kind of relational concept. In other words, the astral body that we are now in process of developing and experiences, that's in some fashion the fruit of our current physical experience as well. But it's in the same mode of time as we experience it. That's why I was, thought what he said, time and space as we now conceive it. It's such an amazing thing we could.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, good thoughts. My feeling is that the sense of time and space is radically shifted, and you don't have to radically shift it. You don't have to be a solar logos to have it radically shifted. All you have to do is die to have it radically shifted. Just out of incarnation, you experience an entirely different experience of time and space. And that's without any progression in consciousness. But, if you think of, at each level of initiation, time and space, what they actually are is going to be radically shifted. I see another hand. Couple.
Yep. Fred.
Yeah, thank you. Apropos of what we're just talking about, could we get a working definition of the word objectivity as it applies to this specific passage, just as our logos is seeking objectivity? Solar system in its threefold form, etc., etc. Because in time and space as we now conceive it, to me, is the key to grappling with this passage.
Right. Yeah, you make a good point. Objectivity is also dependent on where you are and on the chain of manifestation. For us, objectivity is physicality. Which you wouldn't even call our thought forms objective, not from the incarnated physical body point of view, but from the point of view of the soul, thought forms are very much objective. They're very objective things. And a solar logos, objectivity is everything that exists in the cosmic physical plane, which would include, from our point of view, the most subjective of all realities. So it's a point of perspective that term applies. But in general, it means the the vehicles, the form aspect, right? At whatever level, it suggests form. Okay, next question.
Thank you. That's very clear. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Tom?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, about the time and space as we know it. I have considered always that what is called the manifestation is a process. It's a universe process, and to be a process, it has to have a beginning and end, and it has to have a goal. And I have termed it, the goal is the evolution of the consciousness of the monad, and that's why there has to be some kind of time always if you are talking about the process, because then you cannot go backwards, you just have to go forward, and that's kind of proceeding in time, whether we know it as not. And also the greatest, one of the greatest rule of karma would suppose this kind of sequence in all levels of the universe, because the causes produce results. So I really can't understand how the universe could be without time element in any way, because it's necessary to have time and space to be to have a universe and to have this kind of process going on.
Yeah, I think it's very much connected with manifestation. So I think it's possible to, there's a term that DK calls the day be with us, which is pralaya. And I think it's timeless. There is no time in that state, and there is no space, because we all inhabit the same space at the same time. You see, and at the same time, we're beyond time and space, in complete unity with the first aspect at that. And that's, in that space, there is no unfoldment. There is only be-ness, right?
Yeah, can I add that I consider the pralaya as in music you have a pause, but it doesn't stop the process. It's just a pause. So in that way, you would have the time element in very abstract form in the manifestation in pralaya too. It doesn't stop there. It doesn't end. It starts again. So there's some kind of process. Well, that's the way I think. Thank you.
Yeah. And there are many levels of pralaya. There's pralaya. We have pralayas when we go out of incarnation, and then between lives, that's a pralaya. And there are pralayas at all these different levels. And finally, you have the pralaya of absolute pralaya of all manifestation. And if this is a multiverse system, that would mean including all universes. So, even greater than what you might call a universal pralaya, which would apply to one universe. If there's a multiverse, there still would be a pralaya to where all manifestation ceases, but in many ways, the same ideas, rules would apply, though the big difference is in that final pralaya, it's a complete dissolution of everything into the oneness. Whereas in the other pralayas, there's a kind of freezing in situ. That is, you pick up where you left off, because consciousness continues to develop after the pralaya based on what was developed before a pralaya. Only in that most universal pralaya is it all dissolved.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there, because there will be a new universe.
Yeah, right.
So
that's right.
We could ask whether the karmic consequences stop there, but the process doesn't stop there. It just starts again.
There's two schools of thought where whether or not in that most universal of all pralayas, whether or not that is also sequential, or whether it's a complete tabula rasa, a complete wiping, out of all that has been in order to re-manifest anew. So there's two schools of thought on that. The first one to get there, come back and report. I see two hands.
Yeah, Robert.
Okay, I know you probably want to put this discussion into pralaya, so I'll say a couple of quick things. That it's, as DK makes in that sentence, the point of as we now conceive it, it's all based on point of view.
Oh, you're having major interference.
No, that was somebody else.
Oh, it was.
Okay, so
Restate that, Robert.
It's all based on.
Daddy, I'm coming.
Turn that person off, would you please, Mikhail?
Yeah.
It's all based on point of view. So like DK says, as we now conceive it, our point of view is different than the point of view of a solar logos. The question of subjectivity and objectivity, one being's subjectivity is another being's objectivity, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on and on endlessly. And some of these issues are, interestingly enough, dealt with in science fiction, where you have parallel timelines where the Nazis won the world war, et cetera, et cetera. There's TV shows about that. So these parallel timelines, and then time travel in fiction about how people go back to times that still existing. I think that these are real insights that are actually very, very accurate, although they use a dramatic form to try to explore it. But it does give us, I think, a kind of a clue. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in terms of them being very, very accurate, there's no way of knowing that. But, if you've ever read Carlos Castaneda's and his adventures with Don Juan, there were alternative realities that Carlos was sent into. But for instance, he was told one time, you can only stay in this place for a few moments because you will age tenfold or 100-fold if you in your actual life, even though it will seem just a few moments, and that of course gets back to the Einstein theory, which we're not going to get into, of somebody traveling in space aging less quickly than somebody staying back on Earth. But it's all just to show that it is an elastic. It's not a singular perspective, time and space. And we don't know a lot more than that, but that is we do know that much. Okay. Next question. Good discussion, Robert. Was there anybody
Let's
else?
see. I know Tia's hand was raised.
Yes,
Do you
Tia.
still want to ask something, Tia?
Come on, Tia, ask.
And just so you know that I put on mute. It's not set for people to auto unmute because that person was not like a normal attendee.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you let it go. Good.
Yeah, they were hack. They're
Okay.
gone.
Oh, that's the first time I've had that happen. Interesting. Okay, can we move on? Yeah, Tia.
The question that I had to do with the discussion when we started out, we were talking about the primordial ray and the primordial ray and the divine ray, and how the meshing of the two was responsible for the dual evolutions. And so when we get to this phrase, I had a question because humanity, it says here, is polarized, the total number of jivas in their feeling and emotion and desire. but behind that is the will. And it expresses as the will to love. If we look at the David kingdom, we also can make certain conclusions, I guess, about emotion and desire and the role it plays in that kingdom. What would the will look like as it manifests to that kingdom? Would it be, you know, would have to, I would assume, have to play some role in that kingdom as well. Would that be the will to manifest? Or what would you surmise that how will would play in that kingdom?
Well, certainly in all the lower kingdoms, that is the lesser devas and the elementals, it would be, the thing is, they don't interpret the law or they don't employ. They are one with the will aspect, not themselves being the will, but DK says they follow the path of least resistance, which is to obey. But it's not like us where we choose to obey. It is an compelling, an impelling, where they simply follow that line of least resistance unconsciously. You know, they don't develop a personality consciousness that then chooses to do X, Y, or Z, including follow the will aspect, right? They are in that stream of expression of the will aspect. And so in that sense, they're very, very much aligned with it, and yet they aren't the source of it at all. Anyone else?
Another interesting question, I guess, from Magda, talking about practical, is why do we keep talking about myths, angels, devas, demigods, Ahriman, asuras, and so on, if all we are talking about is energies and electric bridge? I understand back in the past, but why do we still have to do it today? Isn't it confusing when even exoteric science talks about cosmic net, neuronal net, and quantum physics, as they have uncovered many important concepts?
Well, because they are entities, you know, they're incorporeal entities, but that doesn't mean that they have any kind of physicality that has any relation to our physicality. You know, for instance, the physical aspect of a planetary logos is the planet. And, you know, so, and yet he's very much an entity. And this is true at all these different levels. A lot of this is inconceivable to us because we've always tended to anthropomorphize all of these aspects that you discuss, right? But in fact, they're even FOHOT, which is called intelligent electricity, and it is an entity. Well, that's the hardest one for me to wrap my head around, you know, of all, because, you know, electricity is an entity. But, you know, that's, I think, because we're so used to tying the concept of entity to the concept of a form vehicle that looks like an entity, you know. So, yeah. Yes, Tia.
I just, in your response to my question, I think I got lost somewhere around where you said they don't embody an independent will, but they are the will in some way. I think could you rephrase that in a way?
They are absolutely unconsciously guided by the will, in the sense that that is their line of least resistance. But they don't, they aren't self-conscious of that will influence. It's like fish in the ocean. You could say, you know, that they have more understanding of the ocean. How couldn't they have more understanding of the ocean than anything else? And from a certain aspect, they do, because they're one with it. but there's no self-conscious understanding of the ocean at all in a fish. I mean, I'm presuming here, but it would seem from our point of view of intelligence that they don't. So it's kind of like that, that they are one with it, but they don't have the separative consciousness that allows them to be aware of that to which they're aligned until much higher levels. Yes, Tia, go ahead. At much higher levels, like a Mahadeva.
No, I now I understand. It's more as if it's impressed upon them, and there is no resistance to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they literally are following that their internal nature is one with the will of God, expressed through a hierarchy of devas. So what the lesser devas are following is the will aspect as it's channeled by the higher devas. Anyone else? Okay. See here. Okay, so we read. Oh no, we were right here, I believe. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, and
Good
now,
conversation. I appreciate it. That's for me the favorite part of these webinars. So go ahead.
so Christine,
Hello.
No.
I need to peg something before we move on to
Go ahead.
what I know, only because the idea of non-ceasing time takes me back to the eternal return. How can you dispute reincarnation? And the idea that we lose time, if you want to comment on that, when we are in effect higher mind, higher consciousness. I mean, these are two aspects that everyday people deal with.
Right. And it's part of the prison house of the soul is that we are so aligned with sequential time, which we're in part released from through death and soul awareness, both of those things. Because after death we return to the soul and some level of soul consciousness, and certainly time is of a different quality at that point. But there's a prison house of space and time that characterizes the indwelling jiva, that is, in other words, the vehicle determines the experience of time and space, and that is not a liberated experience. Like there's HPB talks about this master who used to bemoan the fact that humans talk about the past, the present, and the future when in fact they're all one. So, there's an example of it, but you have to understand this is in consciousness. It doesn't mean that they don't exist, but that they coexist in higher consciousness, and that is a liberated, more expanded understanding of time and space. I don't know. I have no idea if I answered your question, but that's what came to mind.
Okay. In the old commentary, this type of will, the will to love, is spoken of in the following terms. The transcendent one said, I am alone. I must arise and seek with ceaseless urge that which produces completion, round out my circle whole intensity of my life, and make me truly one. And this because I recognize the two. I must have union with my other self, the self I dimly sense. Unto my heart I drew that other, and drawing thus, I gave enlightenment. I dowered with enrichment. I freely gave. This embodies not the mystical vision of the other one, but the will aspect of the planetary logos, the incentive behind the life of Shambhala. It is the Lord of sacrifice who speaks. The keynote of sacrifice, or the process of making whole, runs through all that concerns the will aspect as it functions through the medium of the 7 rays. This becomes beautifully apparent in the activity of the 2nd ray, as it is the channel for the will of God.
Thank you. Yeah, this reminds me of one of the Greek mysteries where one of the solar gods in a place outside of time and space, the forces of evil put a mirror in the room where this god was living. And the god picked up the mirror and looked into the mirror and immediately was incarnated, right? So it's a similar kind of thing, you know. And that's, you know, that's shown here with, I must arise and seek with ceaseless urge that which produces completion, suggesting that that initial stage doesn't reflect the complete purpose of God, of the transcendent one, right? That the complete purpose comes through going through the entire cycle and the return to the Father's house. Excuse me. Okay. Oops, I did it again. Okay, next up.
They have
Yeah.
questions again.
Yeah.
Tia first.
Tia, okay.
Because the logos, the second logos and the undifferentiated logos are polarized in their astral bodies, he's saying, does that mean that the highest aspect of the will that we can unfold in this solar system is the will to love?
Well, you know, that I would say that's it would be, yes, you know, I have to think about it a minute, but the will to be is the will to manifest. That's what drives the David kingdom to produce manifestation, right? The will to love produces the Manasaputras, which are the souls which become the agent of return, you know, from the dense physical back to a solar reality. So yeah, I would say in the solar system, you know, you don't even have what, see, he gave 3 versions of the will. I forgot what the first aspect was. But the will to will, or the will, what would it be? You know, the will, it's not the will to be, because that's the will to manifest, but you know, it would be something like the will to be in beingness, you know, which is just the pure will. And that certainly wouldn't manifest till the next solar system. Okay, yes, Robert, +1, who's next? Who's next?
Robert.
Okay.
I really like this excerpt from EA that you included in this paragraph from the old commentary about the transcendent one that you were just reading around about.
It's on the screen.
Yeah. This is the transcendent one. What's he transcending? You know, because here he is having to, I mean, the paradox of it is really interesting because he's still incomplete. And so, I don't know, it's just kind of a fascinating thing. And then at the very last sentence of the excerpt, when he talks about the activity of the second ray as it is the channel for the will of God. That's for the will of our God in this solar system, because he says in the introductory postulates of this book, God is the solar logos, or the central force. That's what they all mean. So the idea that there are other gods who are, where other rays are their channels, again, is a very, very expanded concept. So thank you. I like this page a lot.
Yeah, we see everything through this lens, this second ray lens. And this, in a way, this shows how much that is true, that because this transcendent one is a second ray logos. Okay, next. Question, next question.
I think it's Tia again.
I was just gonna say, Francis, when we opened up the chapter, we talked about the first logos and the will to live. And so,
Yeah,
we were talking, so instead of the will to be, it was will to live, will to be.
it's the same. It's the
Yeah,
same.
yeah. So that's because we're now dealing with the consciousness aspect, it would make sense that it would be the will to love.
The will to love.
The highest, highest, yeah.
Right. The will to live is the same as the will to be. Both of them, life and beingness usually refer to the first aspect. But in this case, it's the sending forth from that aspect into manifestation. That's what they represent. It's the will to manifest,
And the all these dualities between form and consciousness, that we're dealing with as we even go through this whole discussion of this one page. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's what these webinars are about, that we can slow down enough to, actually give this information its due, Thank you, Tia. Anyone else? Okay. All right, next up, can we get a reader, please?
And now, Marianne.
Thank you. The difficulty lies in the inability of the finite mind to grasp the significance of this threefold manifestation, that by thoughtful brooding over the personality and its relation to the ego, who is the love aspect, and who nevertheless in relation to manifestation in the three words is the will aspect likewise, will come some faint light upon the same problems, raised to deity, or expanded from microcosmic to macrocosmic spheres. The Mahadeva aspect of the first logos, who embodies cosmic will, is controlled by the law of synthesis, the cosmic law governing the tendency to unification only in the case it is not the ununification of matter and spirit, but the unification of the seven into the three and into the one.
Okay, thank you. In this paragraph-long sentence, DK suggests that we apply the as above, so below principle by pondering the relation of the ego to its manifestation as a way of gaining some understanding of the parallel process undertaken by deity as it manifests through its three solar systemic vehicles. In both cases, the animating principle is the will to love, and in both cases, in this solar system. And in both cases, the purpose is to save the lesser lives by drawing them up into the greater. DK gives more insight into this parallel progression later in a treatise on cosmic fire. Could we get a reader, please?
Mesa, do you want to read?
Yes, I'm having just, oh, there we, I'm having visual computer issue there. Okay, I got it.
Good.
The will to be of the Mahadeva aspect seeks, with the aid of the intelligence of Brahma, to develop love wisdom, or the sun aspect, the Vishnu aspect. In the microcosmic system, the reflection of the threefold logos, the man is endeavoring through the three vehicles to attain the same development on his own plane. On higher planes, the heavenly men, through Atma, Buddhi, Manas, aim at a similar progression. These two, the heavenly men plus the units in their bodies, which are composed of Deva and human monads, form, in their totality, the grand heavenly man. When man achieves, then the heavenly men likewise achieve. When they reach their full growth and knowledge and are self-conscious on all planes, then the sun achieves, and the solar system, his body of manifestation and experience, has served its purpose.
Thank you. So I think that one of the most important points here is the interdependence between heavenly men and the units that make up their bodies. That as we achieve, they achieve, and vice versa, because in truth, we are one. Okay. Finally, we have the Mahadeva aspect, or the first logos, who embodies cosmic will, is controlled by the law of synthesis, the cosmic law governing the tendency to unification. Only in this case, it is not the unification of matter and spirit, important point here, but the unification of the seven into the three and into the one. So unity is a second ray principle, whereas synthesis is a function of the first ray. Could we get a reader for this passage on the law of synthesis? Should help us further understand this.
Yeah, Robert, you want to read?
The first aspect, or the will to exist, is governed by the law of synthesis, and the activities of the cosmic entities who are its embodiments are governed by the law of enforced unity and of essential homogeneity. It is the law that eventually comes into play after spirit and matter are blending and adapting themselves each to each. It governs the eventual synthesis of self with self, and finally with the all self, and also of essence with essence, in contradistinction to the synthesis of matter and spirit. It demonstrates as 1, abstraction, 2, spiritual liberation, 3, destruction of form through the withdrawal of spirit, the destroyer aspect, 4, absolute homogeneity and absolute essential unity, 5, progressive forward motion.
Thanks, Robert. The quote, unification of the seven into the three and into the one is a universal law that demonstrates through the seven sacred planets, the seven rays, a human being's seven principles, as well as his or her seven chakras. They all move from 7 to 3 to 1. Could we get a reader for this, please? Before you read, I see a hand. Sam, yes? Sam? Need to unmute, I guess.
No, we gotta,
I don't see him in the list.
yeah, hold on, because I don't know who these people are. Yeah, no.
Are these,
Who else is next on the list to read is Tia.
so we're getting invaded, huh?
The
Looks like,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead, please.
The vortices in each planetary scheme will be during evolution 7. Later, during the period of obscuration, 3 of the vortices will approximate their masculine pole, and eventually but 1 will be left. In man, a similar procedure can be seen in connection with his 7 centers during the process of initiation. First, there are 7. Then 3 absorb the lower 4 through electrical interaction. We are here viewing the subject wholly from the point of view of our present discussion. Finally, only the head center is left, for it is the positive pole to all the others.
Okay. All right. Okay, next up. Yeah. You have people.
Yeah.
I just got knocked out. Are we being attacked?
I just suspended everything because
Oh, I see in the comments. Horrible.
yeah.
Okay, can you get rid of these, all the people that we don't know?
Yeah, it doesn't let me just delete all these things.
I do it. Let's see. So who are the suspects here that appear on the list? I'm just going to leave it to you, but I'm going to, can I start my screen share again?
It should let you.
Okay, I'm thinking it's going to. Okay, there we go. We're back on now. So, okay, nobody right now, anybody who is normally a part of this, put your hands down.
No one else.
So that we can get rid of everybody else. That's
there. It's clear now.
Okay, good. I see that. Okay.
Low
That's
hack,
the first,
but whatever.
yeah, it's the first time that's happened. Okay, let's move ahead. Can we get a reader, please?
The last one I did was Tia, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So Yvonne, would you like to read?
These 3 figures primarily stand for spirit, for quality, for principle, and not so primarily for matter, although matter, being inspired by spirit, conforms. The law of synthesis has a direct connection with one who is still higher than our logos, and is the law of control exercised by him upon the logos of our system. This is a spiritual relationship that tends to abstraction, or to that synthesis of the spiritual elements that will result in their conscious return, the whole point lying in that word conscious, to their cosmic point of synthesis or of unification with their source. Their source is the one about whom naught may be said, as we have earlier seen.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, these 3 figures primarily stand for spirit, for quality, for principle, and not so primarily for matter, although matter, being inspired by spirit, conforms. So the 3 figures are that he's talking about here. The 3 figures are the 1, the 3, and the 7, right? Which, as an expression of the Mahadeva, represent the noumenal pattern of the one indwelling spirit, the 3 aspects and the 7 principles, not the actual outer manifestation, right? Nonetheless, they are all present in all manifested units of consciousness, rather than the particular forms that are governed by these patterns. Next, the law of synthesis has a direct connection with one who is still higher than our logos, and is the law of control exercised by him upon the logos of our system. There are at least two candidates for the, quote, one who is still higher than our logos. The most immediately higher is the logos of the star Sirius. And at the next level, we have the cosmic logos of the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. It's no surprise that the connection between our logos and this higher logos, whether Sirius or the cosmos of the 7 solar systems, is formed through the law of synthesis, which governs the interactions of all the star logoi. Okay. And next up, this is a spiritual relationship that tends to abstraction, or to that synthesis of the spiritual elements that will result in their conscious return, the whole point lying in that word conscious, to their cosmic point of synthesis or of unification with their source. So if we stick with the idea of 7 becoming 1 via the 3, this passage suggests that the one who is still higher than our logos is the logos of the 7 solar systems, of which ours is a part, though part of our solar system synthetic journey would definitely include a coming into unity with the Syrian logos. With the phrase, the whole point lies in the word conscious, we have a succinct definition of the purpose of manifestation for this solar system, which is the gaining of an ever-expanding self-awareness, self-consciousness, leading to consciousness of the whole. Okay, I see I end. Yes, Tom.
Can you shortly explain the position of Sirius here? Because I understood that it would be the our sun is part of the 7-star sun system, and that the one would be that. So how does Sirius come in between those?
Well, it's the soul aspect. It represents the soul aspect for our solar system. So it's an intermediary, just as our soul stands as an intermediary between the personality and the monad. Eventually, our solar system unifies with it in the same way that we unify with the soul aspect. Also, one of the paths out of our solar system, in fact, the path most often taken at the 6th initiation, chosen at the 6th initiation, I should say, is the path to Sirius. So there's a deep interconnection between these two systems.
Okay, I didn't know that the sun will then melt or some kind unite with the Sirius.
Yeah.
First, yeah. Okay, that was new. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, we are, I'm going to finish this page. This is a very quick. So finally, their source is the one about whom not may be said, as we have earlier seen. So we have a threefold thing going on here. So the greater logos, in which even the logos of the 7 solar systems, of which ours is a part, will merge, is the one about whom not may be said. So we have 3 levels. Our logos merging into as being one of the 7 solar systems, merging with the logos of those 7 solar systems. And then that great cosmic being, who is logos of 7 solar systems, further merging into the one about whom not may be said. Okay, and we'll wait until next time and pick up right here with the reading on this. So it's a way of tying the two webinars together. So that'll do it for today.